But we had one that I thought was interesting, and I'm going to use it for the rest of the talk today. They were talking about qualities of coaches. So they had 5 different characteristics of coaches that, or of coaching, that basically everything stems from. And then they had us rank from 1 to 5 what we thought was the most important to least important from a coaching perspective.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you the words, and then I want you to rank them 1 to 5.
Okay.
So just write them down. So
Yeah.
first one is leadership, technical and tactical knowledge.
Tech
Yeah, tech and tactical.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Motivation, communication.
Communication.
Yep. And then, what did I not give you there? Teaching.
Teaching. Isn't that not communicating?
Well, this is why I thought this was interesting. Okay, so you do so just take those, like it's not that deep, but just take those, rank them 1 to 5. Just take a second and rank like how you would order them 1 to 5. I'm gonna do the same, and then we'll just talk about it. So because I'm actually curious, because I bet you we're like almost the exact same.
We'll see.
Okay, so what was your first one?
Well, I put communication or teaching, but I know that's 2. I
We did it 1, 2.
no, I did
Or,
it
like,
1.
interchangeable?
I actually put 1, and then I put it as 4. Like it's interchangeable.
Communication and teaching.
Yeah.
Okay, so for argument purposes, it's 1, 2. We'll talk about it in a second. But I
Okay.
just want to get your rank. So
Okay.
1, 2 is communicating, teaching.
Okay, let's say that.
Okay, so that was the same as me.
Okay.
Okay, what was your 3?
3 would be leadership.
Same.
Really?
Yeah. What was your 4?
Tactical.
Same.
Really?
And then what was the next one?
Motivation.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Exact same.
That's funny.
Exact same. Okay.
It's actually not that funny.
So, so why makes perfect sense actually. So why? Okay, first of all, talk about why the confusion between communication and teaching.
Well, communication.
Because I see a clear difference between them.
Yeah, like communication could be. Communication could be just like, are you talking to your kids about life? Are you talking to kids about things outside of hockey? Right. Communicating a message, being clear, just having conversations, being approachable or not, or like whatever that means. And then teaching is actually teaching the game, like being able to get a message across. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. So I'm the same. So I think that's kind of the 1, 2 for me. The reason I had first one is communicating, because I feel like the other 4 stem from communicating. So if you can't be a good communicator, then how can you be a good leader? How can you share the knowledge that you have? How can you teach well? How can you motivate? It's like, if you're not a good communicator, you can't do those things. So I think they're all dependent on that, but that wasn't how they ranked it.
Okay, I'm really curious what they got.
So I don't remember. I'm trying to remember what
was it,
because he just said it verbally. He didn't have it written on the page.
Do you think it's technical?
It was
or
no.
Or
I think it was something. I think it was leadership and motivator, which I don't like.
Yeah, I know.
Which I don't like.
I'm the same.
Right, but so anyways, the one that I know for sure is that motivator was much higher on the list, which I didn't like that necessarily. So anyways, we'll get to that in a second. So we have communication, we have leadership. So that's why for me, number 1, communication is the most important, because everything else kind of stems from that one. Teaching, for me personally, and it's a little bit dependent on the level, but for the purposes of where I was, which was this Hockey Canada thing where I don't think anyone there was a pro level coach. I think all of them were high level junior down to like 14U, I think their U14 is the first level that you need that certification to coach. So between 14 or 13 and 25, right? So for those purposes, like for that audience, I would say that teaching is the second most important thing you're there for, right? Because it should be more of a development focus. So even if we go so far as OHL or NCAA college, where you want to win, the coaches are trying to move on to be coaches, it's their full-time job, there's money involved in all of this. If they're not developing kids and sending them off to NHL camps or getting drafted or whatever, if that development piece isn't there, then they're not going to be marked as an effective coach to some degree.
Or winning.
Yeah, right. But I think that's the indicator for me for why teaching I'd have as the second. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, and that's why I interchanged them. Like, I'm just trying to put a sentence together here. Like, you can teach because you can teach. I think communication is more important than teaching, because teaching, you could ask me how do I what's a power play, and I could go this, and you go, okay, I've taught you that, but the ability to communicate it effectively so that you understand it, and that you can, and then you know why you're doing it, and what are the other things, like that's where I think communication makes you a good teacher. Not necessarily a good teacher, but makes a teacher. If you can teach something and communicate it well, then you become a good teacher and a good communicator. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay, so then the next you had as number 3 was leadership.
Yeah.
So why do you have that one as 3 and not say 1?
I would say I would say that leadership is depends on what you consider a leader, first of all, right? Like, if you have a neutered cat walk in your dressing room with no energy and just is able to communicate but is dry, it's like um it's not probably not as effective as someone that has energy and stuff like that. So, but you could still be a leader, a quiet leader. Do you know what I mean? So, and I don't know if you need, like, leadership is important as a coach, because, like, if you have some leadership, you can direct the ship a little bit. But if you have a good room, if you have you in the room, then you could take over a lot of that leadership, right? You can delegate leadership to good players as well, and which is leadership in itself, being able to delegate, right? So that's why I think that's it's good. You empower some of your players to be leaders and stuff like that too. Because if you're always looking at, like, if you look at let's call him, what's the football guy, Vince Lombardi, like, he's typically called the ultimate leader. It's like, it's almost could be intimidating to guys to a point. Like, well, but if you're a good leader, guys will follow. That's the point. It's not always intimidation, but I think if you have guys in the room that can lead as well, then I think your leadership qualities don't have to be as high up there.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think exactly that. But this is the problem that I have, again, with when we were talking about this stuff, is that I feel like it all stems from communicating. Like, if you're a good communicator, you're probably going to be a good leader.
Yeah.
So I can't have leadership as number 1 when it's almost dependent on your ability to communicate well. You know what I mean? And I think you brought up a great point, that which I actually hadn't thought of, is even being able to delegate different types of leadership. So, for example, if you're not like, for me, I can get, like, fired up talking about stuff, but I'm not a super raw guy. And if some kids respond to that, you might have a raw assistant coach, or the raw captain, or somebody that can handle that job. So you don't need that to be an effective quality coach. I don't think that component of it is necessarily needed. And that almost ties into the motivation piece, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think that's a good point to be highlighted, is that you can delegate different components of leadership as you need as a coach. So I do think it's super important, because you need your group to buy in and you need all of these things. But I don't think your primary goal or your primary job is to make sure that leadership is the most important thing beyond communicating and teaching. Because I even think of it like, if I'm a young youth coach, and I'm, like, the guy that's on for the whatever house league yellow team practice, there's not a whole lot to lead necessarily. It's just we're out there having a skate. So what's my primary job is be able to explain what needs to be done and be able to teach that. If I'm not the most effective leader of all time in that context, then I don't think that that's gonna hinder your ability to do a good job.
So I've got a question for you,
Yeah.
because I know guys that I've trained that played in the NHL, and I've had this in junior as well, but played in the NHL, that would laugh at their coach. Do you remember? You know who I'm talking about? There's a couple. There's okay. So that's not leadership. He's a good communicator, a very good communicator. Can teach the games X and O's like crazy, but they have zero respect for him. But it's their job and they have to do it, right? Like, he decides who's on the first line, third line, penalty kill, power play, and stuff like that. So he would walk in the room and guys would just, like, make fun of him and laugh at him. And that's several guys. I mean, I've heard that, and they don't have respect for certain coaches sometimes. But it's your job; you have to do it. So is that what you call leadership, or is it that's your boss? You have to listen. Doesn't mean as a leader.
Yeah, that's a great example too. So, and I think that's a good illustration of also of that. You can still be a good coach, considered a good coach, without necessarily having to be a good leader in every context. Obviously, it's better to be a good leader. I'm not arguing that. But I'm saying when you're comparing the qualities, I think communication and teaching are first. But if you have the guy, like I said, that you're on the with the blue team and the coach wears jeans on the ice and doesn't exactly exemplify the best of leadership, if he's a good communicator and he can teach well, then he could still be an effective coach. You know, so I think the leadership contributes to that being better, but it's not the most important necessarily. Um, so the next one was the technical and tactical knowledge.